You can view the video of this podcast on Jazz Cabbage's YouTube or Facebook pages.
We're live on Facebook, Jazz Cabbage Café, the first time we ran the new intro. And we didn't even need to get that fancy in order to be recognized as one of the greatest things of all time, or something similar to that. So anyway, welcome to Jazz Cabbage. We're going to have John Sinclair on today. He joined us right off the bat. This is on from the beginning, and we'll have more time now to talk about the many different things we could talk about with John. And later on, we're going to have
and again, for our audio only listeners on Alexa and Spotify, let's introduce all the people that are online right now that you can't see. Deborah Young's here, Colin McDougall, Jim Salame, Romeo Roach from Medical Mondays, Jamie Lowell. I'm Rick Thompson, and of course, Mr. John Sinclair. Jamie, take it away.
Yeah. Okay. So, and later on, we're going to be joined by Tiffany Coleman, maybe Berg. He's got some other stuff going on, but Roach is here from Medical Mondays. And John told me that he made an attempt to come on Medical Mondays last night, but it just didn't pan out.
I did. I came in the wrong way, I guess.
But that's a fun time, and that was another good show last night.
Came in the wrong way, and it was a fun time. All right.
Well, I was to YouTube.
Yep. So they broadcast on YouTube, but comes in through Zoom. But
didn't have a Zoom Connect.
There you go. You got to watch for a little bit, and I'm sure you were intrigued and stayed on. 5 minutes.
I've seen Berg and Roach before, you know.
Oh yeah. Well, it's a fun time, man. But
and new aspects to their delivery.
Right.
Were you on last night, John, while the gentleman from Trinidad and Tobago was on?
No.
He was interesting. It's 2 weeks in a row we've had him on, talking about the cannabis scene in the Caribbean, talking about different ways they use cannabis, rolling joints in a money tree leaf, roll-on joints, which are a combination of cannabis and tobacco. It's been very interesting, super cool.
And a couple different terms for it too. I can't remember.
How do we get a money tree?
Great.
How do we get one? I want one in my room.
I would share it with you if I had one.
He just grabbed a leaf off of a plant and rolled a joint with it. It was right at the proper level of humidity and stuff to burn. And you didn't have to do anything to it.
I did a little bit of research on that. He was calling it a money bush.
A money
bush,
yeah.
I found out that it's actually a wild hop.
Wow.
So it's related to cannabis.
Yeah.
They go together. Okay.
But it's called hop.
Very cool.
I like how you called it a ready roll. Ready roll.
Nature's wrap. Yeah.
Yeah,
Jamie, remember we tried those cabbage leaf wraps? Who gave us those? That were so terrible.
Oh yeah,
God,
the bunny father or something.
Yeah,
that guy's nickname. I forgot.
They were so bad.
The new thing, yeah, they're hard to roll. First of all, they didn't burn very well. Especially the palm leaves.
Terrible. Ugh. Almost as bad as those original hemp pre-rolls we tried.
I've had better since then. So
yeah, I know.
It does exist. So also a little bit later on, we're going to have Tiffany Coleman on, who has her own story about being connected to John and knowing who John is and stuff like that from elsewhere. She's been around the country, but just moved to Michigan not too long ago. So she's like, I don't think we're talking about the same guy, but it turned out that we were. So it'll be interesting to hear how you've been around. Yeah, she knows about you from a more of a music perspective and stuff. So it's a good story.
I'm proud to say I contributed to the legalization efforts in many states.
Oh yeah.
Massachusetts, Maine, California, Oregon, Washington, Colorado. I appeared in all those places.
Absolutely.
You appeared in places to support cannabis law reform, John?
It's in high demand.
Do I support it?
No. When you appeared in those states, did you support cannabis law reform? Were you speaking publicly on cannabis law reform?
Yes, they brought me there.
And his, as an icon, the story that leads up to everything that brings him to those places too stands for lifting prohibition on cannabis, which we want now. You know, John, Anyway, let me get back to Tiffany coming on a little bit. And one of the things I wanted to talk about from a scientific perspective is this trend of Delta 8 products. Are you familiar with those, John? Instead of, Delta 9's the form of cannabis when it's been activated that, you get high with, but Delta 8 apparently is, has a lot of the, all the other components, but stops short of, getting you as high, I guess. And it seems to be like a trendy thing, similar. What I'm seeing is that it's following in the same pathway as the CBD thing, which in my opinion went out of control fast and early and became its own thing now, kind of. But somebody, I believe, trying to like use that formula on this new product, but I don't know. She knows a lot about it from a scientific perspective. And
Right.
One time I had Delta 8 flower before, and it was not too much different than like THC. I'd say it was maybe like more of like I felt it like throughout my body, I guess. It was just not like my like thoughts are moving as fast, I guess, as of when I like smoke THC. But it was, I mean, my friend, he grew it. He's from Portland and he worked with me at Bloom as a bud tender. And he had a couple strains that he was just growing, and one of them was a THC Delta 8. So
I didn't know that was a way that it came into existence. I'm interested to hear what she's got to say.
yeah, I thought it was THC Delta 8, but I mean
that has to go through a chemical change to get there on some level. A strain that just produces it like that is new information to me. I don't know anything about it.
What if it was like cured for like a long time or something?
I'm gonna wait till we find out from somebody who knows a little bit about it, because I really don't know. People have come into the store wanting to sell it, saying, "Yeah, it says it doesn't get you high, but you actually do get high." And similar to like the products line showing up in gas stations and stores of their own and stuff like that, like CBD. I've been seeing it with this too, and I know that we're not turning it on to anybody who comes into our store, unless or until we confirm that it's, something reasonable.
Have they left any samples? You haven't tried it yet?
I'm not even trying it. I think I got a Delta 8 vape pen from somebody like a year ago or something.
I remember seeing vape pens.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll find out a little bit more about that. But John, I'm glad you came on early. We got more time to talk about some stuff and combination of what's going on now and some of the historical stuff. I know you were just on a interview at WDET talking about Sun Ra.
What?
And what's that?
What?
I thought you were just on the Concert of Colors this past weekend too, weren't you, John? I saw some people posting about that.
I wonder if what I listened to was was an interview that took place a while ago and they just reposted it.
There you go.
Yeah,
Maybe.
it was still really cool, man. The Afrofuturist, the 60s and 70s Sun Ra, and there was a guy on this interview. He played with Sun Ra. I didn't catch his name, and he said, "I thought that like Mingus and Monk were way out there until I met Sun Ra."
Right.
That's a pretty strong.
I read that too, but I think maybe I read it. Did you post it, Jamie? Because I read the article too. I don't know how. Maybe through
It's on
you.
the John Sinclair page on Facebook.
Well, maybe that's where I saw it. Okay.
I saw it in my
read
news
it.
feed today.
Yeah, I know I read it.
Supposed to.
I listened to it and it was very cool. Like 10 minutes long. And you said that he would be in the middle of a conversation and then go play his set and come back a few hours later and pick up right where he left off.
Oh yeah.
So, John,
At his point.
So Big Chief Productions too is a big part of your musical history. And that covers some pretty big names and some nice projects and things like that too.
Was that on there too?
No, since it's a musical connection and I happen to know that that's one of the major things that you've done.
Well, Steve the Fly just invented a new site for us at Bandcamp and put all of my albums on there. I got about 30 albums up there.
Oh, wow.
Those are
Just
just
talking-
as an artist. And then I have a lot more albums I produce for Big Chief Productions.
Right. And who are some of those artists?
Oh man. My favorite was an album of Detroit Blues. I did a part of the 1973 Ann Arbor Blues and Jazz Festival, where I rounded up all of the guys that were still alive that were Detroit blues men and presented them in one show and recorded it. And then I made an album of it called Motor City Blues, I guess. That's my favorite. But also Roosevelt Sykes, Victoria Spivey, Big Walter Horton, the King Biscuit Boys, Little Sonny, the great Detroit harmonica player, Sun Ra. I got all three of Sun Ra's Ann Arbor Blues and Jazz Festival performances out on a record from Peter Dennett in England. I forget what he calls his label. Anyway, that's some of them. Now, of course, the MC5, Rich Rider, and the Rationals, you know, rock stuff in the 60s.
Awesome. Right on. Yeah, so I was talking to somebody who
I'm willing all these to my foundation that we've talked about.
Yep. There's a lot of stuff like that, man.
We'll be able to relicense these things and raise money to pay for the director, Steve the Fly, and for other activities.
Right, and that foundation has a lot of projects in mind to really help out the arts and to preserve your legacy.
It's going to own a lot of copyrights.
Yep. I was talking to a guy who was involved with the sound of Howling Diablos over the years, and he was.
Who was?
A guy who I spoke with recently is working up north in the cannabis industry. His name is Mike Bishop, actually, and he was worked with sound with Howling Diablos quite a bit, and was around when you recorded some of that stuff with them.
Yeah, they've been in my band since 1982.
I love them. They're really fun.
And Tino Gross.
Yeah, we saw Tino. Remember when we went and visited John? Tino was coming in as we were leaving.
You know, was there the day we were at Third Man too, and John was doing the reading.
Yeah, he's a cool guy. But I love Howling. I love it when they're on a bill. When I go to a concert and they'll have like 3 or 4 bands and they'll be the opening band.
Johnny
It's
B.
always fun.
On drums.
Johnny B.
Yeah.
Hey, Jake Greba from this industry on percussion and stuff like that too.
It's very cool stuff.
Midnight Roots and the Gene Carlos things.
Yeah.
A lot of for some reason, you know, music and cannabis kind of go hand in hand. Have you noticed that, John?
Some reason.
Jamie's revelation right there.
This is why I
An
admire
epiphany.
Jamie so much.
Yeah.
You know,
No.
he just comes up with these things that nobody's ever said before.
But if we think about it though, rock and roll over the last 40 years has had suppression attempts time and time again. So many times people have tried to keep rock down, saying the lyrics were too provocative, saying the music was too suggestive, saying that it strayed too far from the norms of what American culture was. But rock and roll pushed, and it persevered. And now it's morphed into all these other different things that are based on a rock and blues base. Cannabis is the same way too. They tried to suppress cannabis law reform so many different ways, telling us we were too radical, we were too out there. It's very similar as far as those two arcs go.
You're a master of words.
Weed will get you high. Rock and roll, it's a consumer issue now. I look on it as a weapon of cultural oppression by the people who own everything. They own all the rock and roll, and it's about trying to become a millionaire. Fuck
Yeah,
that.
it's way different now too. You know, I don't know how people there's not
Doesn't
albums
sound good.
anymore per se.
Corporate rock. You're
Yeah,
with MC5, and MC5 are recognized historically as being innovators in music. You know,
That
around
was 60 years ago.
around the beginnings of punk rock and taking it to different directions. And was it that vibe from them that made you want to work with them, or did you get with them to help create that vibe, or did that just all come together?
Well, when I heard the MC5, I thought they were the most exciting band I'd ever heard. So I became a big fan. And I attended every one of their performances for a year. And then I became their manager.
And they became innovators and a huge part of music history. It was it a year or two ago, the 50th anniversary was.
They had a guy named Rob Tyner who was the lead singer, and he had an innovative mind.
Yeah.
He created this whole concept. His idea was you could take a rock and roll band and change society with it, not just get rich.
They did just tour with the 50th anniversary, but the only original member is Wayne Kramer now. So it's not
MC50.
the same. MC50, yeah.
Thompson's still alive, but he's not playing too much.
He's not with them, yeah. It was a good show though. I went and saw it. It was still a good show, but
I
it's
saw
not
it
the
too.
same.
They were fantastic.
Yeah, I had a great time. It was
I
a
saw
really
them
great
in
time.
Andrews.
Yeah, Wayne Kramer was good. The new lead singer was good too. I mean, he was channeling. I mean, it was good. Yeah, I saw him back in the day too, back in the 70s.
Bands of their own, you know.
Yeah,
Wayne picked them off.
it was fun. I got the poster on my wall right here. I'm looking at it. MC50 at the Fillmore.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
Well, they played it. It played like 2 or 3 different venues in the course of like a week in Detroit. You know, they had like little
I
shows
remember.
around town. So yeah, it was a good thing. It was fun. I'm a big fan. I'm a big MC5 fan. I'm a big Fred Sonic Smith fan. I'm a big Patti Smith fan. So it all ties together.
So, John, in that year that you were essentially fanboying around with MC5, where were the venues they were playing at that time?
Baby Bottom.
The bottom?
I saw him
There.
at the Royal Oak Theater many years ago, before it looks like it looks now. It used to look just like a movie theater. I saw him there many years ago.
You guys did the 1968 Democratic National Convention too in Chicago.
Yeah.
Oh, we didn't go to the Democratic Convention. We went to the Festival of Life. Fuck the Democratic Convention.
Okay. I guess I got my information.
It says that though on like Wikipedia and everything though. It was like across the street.
Festival of
Though.
Life was a protest against the Democratic National Convention, held in Chicago at the same time, but in Lincoln Park, which was north of where the regular convention was.
That's good clarification.
So talk about that. That's a piece of American history, and you were there. You know, won't you please come to Chicago or else join the other side, as Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young said. It was huge.
Yeah.
So
Big deal. It was a police riot.
what do you mean?
The police attacked the demonstrators with weapons.
Yes, most definitely. Most definitely.
They
Most
beat their
definitely.
ass.
It's what they did back then.
And people didn't have
I still
phones
do.
with video cameras on it.
No.
The best
did it.
video of our performance was by the FBI.
Can you tell us why that is?
I'm not I can't explain the FBI.
No, well, I don't think any of us could, but
Social control.
right. So the whole issue there, John, if you can summarize, there's a lot of people watching this.
Nixon's most wanted list. I guess he hadn't been elected yet, but we oppose the government.
Nixon's most wanted list.
Nixon described our organization, the White Panther Party, as the most dangerous left-wing organization in America. Because we had a rock and roll band.
And Adam Brooks reminding us that the MC5 was the only band that showed up at that festival.
Yeah. That's what I thought too.
Everybody was supposed to be there and nobody came. Bands, all the bands were supposed to be there. Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane. Country Joe and the Fish. Country Joe was there. He got attacked in an elevator by a Democratic delegate.
Country Joe McDonald?
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
He fled. Tuli Kupferberg of the Fugs, he wouldn't come. That's how fucked up it was. Tuli Kupferberg wouldn't come. Ed Sanders was the musical director of the Festival of Life. Ed Sanders, the leader of the Fugs. His own band members wouldn't come.
So the reason they wouldn't come is because they were afraid the police were going to beat them up, or because there was too much heat on the situation?
Sure, the police were going to beat them up. It wasn't a matter of being afraid. They were sure the police were going to beat them up because that's what they were there for.
So understandable why they didn't show up to get beaten up,
Yeah, it is understandable. We didn't give a fuck.
right?
We used to getting beat up by the police in Detroit.
They showed up, yeah.
It's 420, everyone.
And we've been joined by Tiffany Coleman, who we introduced earlier in the show. Hey, Tiffany. And,
Tiffany, meet John Sinclair. I understand you're a big fan.
Can't hear you.
yep, all types of great shit was coming out. She just needs to unmute.
Who are you talking about?
Introducing you to Tiffany Coleman, who just joined us, John.
Tiffany, hi.
Hello. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
Yep.
perfect.
Awesome.
Yep. So, Tiffany, how about, we're going to talk a little bit more about your experiences in Michigan, and as we said, what you specifically kind of like what your thoughts are from your position scientifically about Delta 8 and that kind of stuff. But, it was kind of interesting talking before coming on today and meeting John that you were very much aware of John from doing things elsewhere. You've only been in Michigan for a few weeks, and it was very cool for you to hear that he was here and such a part of things and stuff like that. So what is that? What is that story about your connection with John?
Yeah, so my very good friend Bianca introduced me to what I believe is spoken word over a jazz album. And this was, as far as I can tell, some poetry that Mr. Sinclair had presented. And it was the first time I had heard political commentary over what I, later started calling acid jazz. And it was the first time I had heard that. And she then started taking me to a place in Kansas City, which is called the Vinyl Underground. And it's been there since like the mid 70s. And they actually had, I believe, their curated albums. They kind of go along the same thing. When you were trying to tell me, you were telling me about coffee, I believe, and his enjoyment of that. And then I started thinking, is it the same person that I had learned about in my youth from my good friend? And, come to find out it was, right? So it's surprising for me because, a lot of times these figures of, in my mind, the civil rights movement, who you hear about when you go to museums, okay? In this case, it is the Kansas City Jazz District where I was first learning more. You don't think of them as people that you could actually speak to or that people that actually know. They are these figments of history. And so, when you told me that this was the case, that's where I went. And then I got super jazzed about it and did a little bit more research. And I was like, yeah, okay, so it is the same gentleman who is here with us today. And that's, you were wearing that hat earlier today, and I was just like, that is so cool. So, it just all kind of wraps together for me.
I had the White Panther hat on that you gave me.
Yes.
Earlier in a call.
Sorry, you're not wearing it now, so no one was.
No, this is my patriotic hat celebrating the lack of nationalist authoritarian.
So, is it true then that you were known for curating jazz and blues musicians together and also bringing very politically charged spoken word at a time when spoken word wasn't really done live at venues? Is that the case? That's how I was introduced.
We called it poetry.
Yes.
Spoken word was just a marketing concept.
Right on.
All word is spoken. We're speaking words now.
We are. We are.
Sometimes John gets pretty deep.
Way to get out of saying that people are writing poetry.
Yeah, they definitely didn't want to be called
Poetry's
poets.
so much hipper than everything else that they don't like to admit that they were doing it.
No, that's very cool. I'm glad that that all came together. And that's
for about 60 years.
Wow.
and before you came on, Tiffany, we were talking about Big Chief Productions, which was involved in capturing a lot of that with the various bands that he worked with and some other great artists too, including Sun Ra and many others.
That was my production company.
Yep. A lot of stuff going on there. So that's very cool. So,
Weed.
yep. So Tiffany made her way to this industry too. She started off in the pharmaceutical background and got involved with cannabis and has been with a few companies, been in a few different states, made it to Michigan to work for a different company that got started and didn't really work out. And the company that I'm with, fortunately, came across her, and she stayed in Michigan and picked her up. And
you grabbed it, huh?
Yeah, I think all is well. And that coffee thing, Tiffany, was the coffee food service up in the lounge up north is going to be branded by John, and hopefully that'll help out his foundation too, ultimately. But it's nice to be a part of things a little bit more directly. But so Tiffany's does quality controls, putting together the lab, the processing lab, up there, and has a patient focus, really cares about the medicine for people to use, to benefit from, and joined our state Michigan ASA group, which, by the way, interject with that for a second, connected to you, John, your case, Sinclair versus the Board of Pharmacy.
Yeah, someone wrote about that. Black just wrote in about that to the solicitor.
I didn't see that, but the current status is there's some technical problems with it, and so a lot of people don't think it looks good, but it still has a chance of being heard, and possibly along with some amicus briefs to help, add additional information. A friend of the court, their third party submit information for the court to consider, and Michigan ASA would be one of the organizations submitting an amicus brief if they choose to accept it. If not, a new case will probably get refiled before too long and cover some of the issues that the first case.
What's their fucking beef? I don't get it.
You know what? That's a profound question. We've had this discussion here many times. It's indefensible.
It's one of the things they can hold on to that hasn't been outlawed yet.
It's illogical, and the legislature doesn't really care if things are illogical.
No, they don't care. They don't think about it. Whoa, bird!
Yeah, a bird popped in.
What's up?
So,
I'm here.
So we brought it up earlier a little bit. I'm kind of curious about the Delta 8 thing, Tiffany, and if you don't mind taking a second out to discuss that. I kind of saw a similar line, a similar formula, opportunists maybe trying, after seeing the success of the CBD type product explosion, and maybe trying to home in on that success a little bit. But I don't know anything about it. Maybe some people had different experiences with it here. But what do you know about it? What should people know about it?
Yeah, so I mean, in my opinion, Delta 8 has come about because there's so much CBD in the market that doesn't have a commercial home, right? So lots of farmers, lots of processing facilities, barrels of CBD that 2 years ago was selling for $30,000 or $40,000 a kilo, and now is selling for $300 or $400 a kilo, maybe $900 if you've got like the best of the best. And needing an outlet for that material, people look to the synthetic creation of THC analogs, and in this case, Delta 8 would be one of those, and it's a more stable form of the chemical process to take CBD and turn it into a THC analog, right? The process inherently goes to Delta 9 first. It's just part of it. There's always isomerization there. And then you just continue to push the reaction further to get it to go to Delta 8. For me, as an organic synthesis chemist, I've been doing this kind of work for a long time. Not usually with CBD to THC analogs, because that was, I always felt that things coming from the plant were a little bit more pure, right? I wanted the full effect. I didn't just want, dronabinol or marinol, okay? And that's what they're creating in this case, right? They're using the chemical process, starting with a CBD precursor, and they're creating these isomers. You know, from a compliance standpoint, you know, the jury is still out with the DEA on whether this is a legal activity or an illegal activity. From a consumer safety standpoint, which I definitely care about, most of the products that have been available in the last year to 6 months haven't been terribly clean, meaning there's a lot of other byproducts that are left behind that I, from a quality standpoint, don't want to be putting into patients' bodies. That doesn't necessarily mean that we can't get to a point where we have better control over those processes and we have better testing protocols in place to make sure that the things are safe. But when we think about it, you know, the United Nations and the drug labs have known about Delta 8 for a long time, right? It's part of their war on drugs, like, stable of saying these are synthetic products and we should, you know, find them and shut people down, right? It's on the list for a reason. And most of the time it was people weren't starting from CBD because CBD wasn't readily available, right? They were getting there in a different way. But that's like the broad strokes, right? Is that we're taking a commodity, in this case, CBD isolate, readily available because of the influx of hemp farmers across the country and hemp processors, and making that into what they think will be a product that people are going to want to buy. We're not even certain that it gets people high, although we do know that it usually has between 5 and 10% Delta 9, and we know that that gets people high. So that's a lot of the products that are out there on the shelf, and I think the DEA at this point has only done a few enforcement actions across the nation, and those are still like in the process of going through the courts, right? So until there's a little bit more clarity on whether or not the synthetic production of D8 is going to be legal, I think that it's not large production companies that are making it. And so the level of quality control to make sure that the byproducts and impurities aren't present is just not controlled enough to make me feel comfortable for giving it to patients across the country.
Federal government has really stepped up and said CBD companies that are making health claims that don't have scientific evidence behind them, they're preventing them from using it in packaging. They're putting penalties on companies, threatening to pull the plug on some of them. Delta 8 is an industry that's in danger of following those bad footsteps of the CBD industry. Those are just the end results of unregulated capitalism, right? People trying to sell as much product as possible, and since there's nobody smacking their hand, they're going to make whatever bombastic claims they can.
Yeah, for sure. The warning letters over the last 4 years have been pretty sparse, but they're, you know, if you look at the chart of the total number, like the first year it was like 4, and the next year was 12, right? And then last year was like 30, right? So, you know, as far as enforcement actions and, you know, recalls being forced and, you know, seizures of material by the FDA, I think in this case, the real deal is that most of these people are, and they know that they are too, which is like the hardest part for me. They're making Delta 9, which they know is a controlled substance, regardless of whether we want it to not be, right? And they're doing it usually in facilities that are not licensed by the states where that might be legal to do this practice. And then they're either denying that they've made Delta 9, which is unique in my opinion, because chemistry will tell you what's present, okay? Or they're diluting it with these diluents that are also dangerous to make it compliant to the less than 0.3% Delta 9 THC that needs to be in products to make them compliant to the hemp standard, right? So, I mean, both avenues are putting people who don't think they're doing drugs at risk.
So the product, either from a natural perspective, also contains THC-9 and it skirts around all the commercial restrictions and controls and everything, or it's got synthetic extra shit in it that is harmful in and of itself.
Yeah, and I would note, so Delta 8 does not occur in currently existing plants by itself in percentages that you could pull out, right? It's not part of the THCA synthase that creates the molecule in the plant. So it's not like you're going to be extracting Delta 8 from a plant, okay, and then concentrating that. Like that's not how that works. It is a chemical reaction that's being performed in a lab, and it's taking the CBD molecule, breaking it into two parts, and then re-putting those parts back together to turn it back into THC, right? So it's, you know, I have a hard time with it because I'm a natural product chemist, okay? I take products from nature, right? And I figure out how to make them from readily available products that usually come from like petroleum. Like that's what I've done for most of my career. And that's what these people are doing, but they're like, no, we're not. And I'm like, yeah, you are, right? Like there are words for natural processes, right? Like combustion is a natural process, right? Fermentation, natural process. A catalyst, like a palladium catalyst in an acid base wash. Okay, no, that's not. It's not a natural process. Palladium doesn't just like naturally hang out in a catalytic form, right? That's not how it works.
Right.
So
when you mentioned,
I didn't know. Okay. Go ahead.
When you mentioned earlier, you mentioned dilutants, and obviously they take some highly concentrated stuff and then they dilute it down so that that THC number is below the 0.3 necessary to qualify as hemp. But that's the same type of philosophy that got us vitamin E acetate out of the vapor pens earlier.
It 100% is. It 100% is.
It's exactly the same story.
They just did the first vape-related recall of a batch in Oregon's legal market because people were using diluents that were then found to be causing patients to die in Oregon, right? Now, like, let's think about this, okay? Someone who's working in a legal market has access to legal THC in their state decides for whatever reason that they want to use a diluent that's never been used in humans before for a product that's going to go into patients. Like,
Jamie, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but the only thought is it extremely, extremely cheap or something? Is there an advantage that's
I still don't understand it myself, right? Like, I mean, you can take a distillate product that's, you know, and not even clean it up that much, and it's going to have a lot of plant protein in it, and you can spread your THC out, okay? You don't have to make it super clean, okay? And when I say super clean, I mean you can leave stuff in it and the flavor might not be that great, all right? It might have a bit of a harsh smoke because you've got all those plant proteins left over, right? Like you could do that if you wanted, right? If you wanted to sell a 60% THC cartridge. If you're going to make 98% THC distillate and then you're going to sell it as an 80 or a 75, right? Because you're cutting it with a diluent just to save that extra 15 to 20%. Why spend the time to make it 98% to begin with? You know, I mean, it comes out of the plant better than that. You know, you could just take hash and press it and have a better product if that was what you were looking for. So for me, I get confused about that. And I assume that it's capitalism. I assume it's somebody looking at a number and saying, I need 1,500 units and I only have enough for 1,300 units. So what can we add to it to get those next 200 units, you know? And it's crazy because in the federally regulated market, these kinds of things happen to like baby food and mouthwash and toothpaste. And when they happen,
and it's totally legal. The FDA totally makes it legal.
Right. Well, I was gonna say then they're adulterated, and then you can't sell them, and then people die, and then now we have regulations that require us to have supplier controls for all of our suppliers and raw materials at a federal level, but that we never had before because somebody was dumb enough to think, oh, ethylene glycol, super good to put that in baby formula. Like, why? You know? Because because some guy in China thought that he could save a buck by using a byproduct from another process and poison babies. Like this legit happened like 5 years ago, right? So I mean, it's a real example of of capitalism gone awry. Like, there's no reason to poison children.
Agreed.
I think we can all agree.
Why not just
But
smoke
they did.
some joints?
What about joints?
Why not just smoke some joints?
Why not? Exactly.
Why not?
It's the answer for a lot of things.
Great idea. I think I will.
Yeah, thanks, Rick.
Thanks for reminding me.
I knew
Jared.
you'd agree.
Something slipped my mind. Couldn't put my finger on it. Now I know.
Sure.
Oh.
How has Michigan been in general? What's your perception on the fledgling industry here?
Well, it seems to me like some of the boutique products that are coming out of like Central California and Colorado are being mainstreamed here, but not at the level of quality or with the eye on the craft and detail that I've seen in the western half of the United States. And I don't know if that's because people just don't care here, or if it's all just marketing, or
Well, there's a lot of big money interests that know nothing about cannabis and just,
Yeah,
they just,
like,
hey, just throw these
I don't
walls
know
up and
what
get
it
growing,
is.
you know? Well, that's part of it. And then it does exist. The cannabis does exist. It's just not in the numbers that we need to have easy access to it. And
That's
really
been-
good cannabis exists in the caregiver community, but that's not in the commercial market.
Yeah, I think also for me, you guys have been up here and established for a while. Like, it's not brand new, right? It's like over a decade of some kind of quasi legality, whether or not the police were allowing it, not enforcing randomly, because the police are police.
Since 2008.
Yeah, it's a long time, right? And so you would think that some of these things would have like kind of balanced themselves out, but that's not the case. It definitely seems
Again.
kind of like the Wild West. And the pricing, like I was coddled in the Colorado industry. Okay, you can buy an ounce of excellent weed for like $50, and you just cannot do that
What are
here.
you talking?
Okay. And so like now I'm like, okay, now I'm just gonna buy shake bags because I can't afford anything else, right? I'm like, what do I, like I don't know how people are doing it here. So I'm like in my basement trying to figure out how I can veg next to the grow tent. Like what's gonna like how long, and like my seeds are like 15-week flower seeds. I'm like, this is terrible. I should have gotten some, faster flower in cannabis. It's gonna take forever to grow. I mean, it's just and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna go somewhere. I'm gonna find cuttings. I'm gonna get a few cuttings. These cuttings are gonna be, and then I'm like, okay, but I can't veg and flower in the same tent. And I only brought one because I didn't think it would matter, right? I didn't think I'd have to grow my own. But now I know I was very, very wrong. So there you go. I see you guys all have your nice weed. Where do you get it, and can you get it for a relatively cheap compared to the Colorado pricing that I just shared with you?
Not quite there, but
closer than the
Closer,
ridiculous
yeah.
prices. I'm seeing like $12 to $15 a gram. It's like insane.
You need to find a good caregiver.
You just need a good caregiver, somebody who's growing in their basement.
Yes.
A woman.
There's a lot of
that
good
grows
cannabis that
in her
way.
basement.
Yeah.
Yes, that's best. Tiffany, there's something I've been meaning to ask you. I just read today that in Canada, they have reported that they have 1 billion grams in storage right now. They have 100,000 kilos in storage, that's enough for the entire market to be supplied for 3 years. Let's talk a little bit about what happens to cannabis as it's stored over time. Now, as cannabis consumers, we know all about the curing process in which moisture is either gained or lost as the curer desires based on how they store it and how they work it. That means that there's some chemistry changes going on there during the curing process. What happens long term to cannabis, and when should we be retesting cannabis because it significantly changes THC percentage?
Yeah, so it depends on storage conditions, right? There was actually some really good work done in the early 90s about this. With terrible cannabis, I might add, that was grown on the NIDA farm in Mississippi. So, I mean, it was like 4% THC cannabis, okay? So just the worst that you could possibly think of. that you drive by on the side of the road. Okay. But what they did was they took that and they said, all right, I'm going to put it in the fridge in the dark. I'm going to put it like on the shelf in a controlled room, like with controlled temperature, also in the dark. I'm going to put it on a shelf and with light on it. Right. And then they measured what was the percent of THC that decreased over time. And for flower, they found that they would have a significant degradation if it was at room temperature with light over the first 2 years. And by significant, what they would say is they could no longer detect THC. Okay. So they're testing the flower, it was at 4%, and in 2 years, it's gone. It's all been converted over to CBD or CBN, I'm sorry. But if they stored it in the fridge, it would still have some, although not all, right, after those 4 years. And they didn't look at it past 4 years. So when I think about shelf life, if I'm storing it in the dark, which you should be, okay, and it's not getting those UV rays that are helping that reaction happen, then you probably have 6 to 18 months if it's stored in a place where moisture content can't change, right? It's dark, it's not hot, because you also degrade if it's super hot, right?
Does it help when you like use a food saver vacuum or anything? Does it help to like, save it?
Yeah, so yes and no. It helps to save the oxygen. When you use a vacuum and you pull the oxygen out, right? You pull the air out, you're removing that oxidizer, so it helps to save the color. I don't know if you've probably seen, like, you had really nice weed and maybe it had like multiple hues, maybe a couple greens, like maybe some reds and purples in there. And then like if you leave it in your jar in the closet for like 3 months and you pull it out and it's like yellowed a little, it's like going to tan. It's oxidizing, right? That's a chlorophyll oxidizing. And that also doesn't taste great after that happens. And that's part of the drying process too, is to kind of let the chlorophyll degrade quickly and kind of leave the plant. Yeah.
So, Tiffany, if I can just follow up, so at what point does cannabis begin to degrade once it's stored? I mean, degrade to a significant degree. We talked about 18 months maybe before it's like useless cannabis, but
yeah, immediately. The answer is immediately. If you don't keep it in the dark, it starts degrading right away. There are some studies that show 20 days if it's kept in the light, and it's toast. Personally, having intentionally tried to make CBN, I know that if I use sunlight on milled material set out in the sun, that I can force degradation over a few weeks, which is around that 20-day time period. And we don't have to wonder about this stuff. Amazingly enough, in the 70s, they did all this research, right? Like, this is like scientifically published. Like, we don't have to be like, I wonder if THC degrades in light. No. There were scientists. They tested it. It definitely does.
Yeah, but the weed nowadays is totally different too, though,
More potent for sure. I mean, back in the 70s, like the best stuff they had was like 11%. Like that was, there were no publications that had more than 11%. And now I've seen up to like the low 30s.
Yeah, 32, 33 is maybe.
Yeah. So it's plants are being bred for their potency, whether or not that's a good idea.
Yeah, and of course, potency as it relates to THC percentage is kind of becoming an old school kind of a concept. I mean, it's the THC.
I definitely prefer like the 12 to 14s myself. So, I mean, there are some
9% depending on what's surrounding it and depending on the person's individual system that'll kick your ass all over the place, and there are 20+% that you won't necessarily get that high from. So
yeah, that's Roach's speech, right? Doesn't he say that?
It's the most current kind of thought on it. Yeah, in flower and in concentrates, the THC number doesn't seem to make that much of a difference.
Yeah.
I've always had this theory that in the 70s, people talked about Acapulco gold and Colombian gold, and they always called things gold. And I always imagined it was because they stored it for so long and it just turned gold. It turned that tan color.
It might have feel like that.
Okay. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the
And
color
red,
of the top
too.
of the cola. It was like a
Best
light
weed
orange.
I ever had was Colombian, was Panama Red.
Yeah, I was
Yeah?
gonna say
Yeah.
the red. Yeah, we used to get red all the time.
Red hairs. all
Tie
over.
sticks and things like that. I
Let's see,
mean,
it was like
I smoked the 70s stuff, so
Gersh Avery, I think, had some like Colombian gold genetics not too long ago.
yeah.
The last few years or something like
good
Well,
that.
that
weed,
was exciting
Colombian
if you
gold.
got something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We used to get some great hash back then too. Get those big Afghani like red hash.
Yeah, I was
Really
trying to
nice.
grow
Good
some
indeed.
a Colombian land race last year, but it was like 17 weeks for flower, and I feel like for most people looking at like an 8 to 9 week turn, that it just wasn't going to work. Like it's not going to work with the rest of the plants in your garden, right?
Yeah.
So you're gonna have to have a separate room for these longer flowering strains. But I'll tell you, it's
Right.
stacked up. You know, it was gorgeous.
Well, if you
Just
keep
wish
a
I could have grown it
continuous
for longer. I cut it down at like week 10, and it
You know,
needed
so-
like 5 more weeks.
no, if you keep a continuous flower room going though, you could just keep that stuff flowering.
Mhm.
Just keep it
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
while you harvest it, earlier.
Some of those
stuff.
they take longer, but like the end
Yeah.
product is so good.
Yeah,
for
if
some-
you have,
for
two
sure.
rooms, have a veg room, flower
Yeah,
room, everything's
dirty.
going continuous.
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier, I just have one tent.
Yeah, no, I know, but I'm just saying,
Gonna
for
get
future
another tent,
reference.
guys.
You know,
It's gonna be
for future
necessary to live
reference.
here in Michigan because there's not enough sunlight to throw it on my porch. Okay.
I'm sure our friends at Grow Green would
Yeah.
be happy to help you out and hook you up a
Yeah.
little bit.
For
So
sure.
Tiffany, when should cannabis be retested? We test it prior to packaging. It's packaged up. It's sent out. Sometimes it takes a week or two from packaging before it's given to the retail center because there's a delay in testing and everything else too. When should cannabis be retested? Because it is likely no longer compliant with the profile that's being given to the customer, to the patient.
Yeah, I give everything a 90-day shelf life. So, and I did that while I was in Arizona. I'm gonna do that here.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that's the expiration date, but that's definitely when there's a possibility that you've lost enough that the test result will no longer be compliant. And so if we still had material that was in the shop or waiting to go out after 90 days, which I hope we don't. I'm told that there's not enough supply and everybody wants the weed we're growing. But if for some reason we had it after 90 days, then certainly we would be retesting.
Well-
The hard part is it's not possible to retest a metric, right? So,
You'd
I
have
guess
to
I'm gonna
recall
have
an
to be
entire
asking
batch.
Yeah, I'd have to be asking permission from the regulators over and over again to do this thing. But probably I'll just do research and development test on it, right? Get the results. And if the results don't satisfy me, then I will let the MRA know that we're going to do a recall on anything that hasn't been consumed yet.
Mhm. Voluntary recall, not for
Correct.
contamination, but for freshness.
Yep. For making sure that what a patient or a consumer thinks they're getting is what they're getting. Right? I want the label to be consistent with what's in the package.
And we
That's a
talked
good-
about some cool. Michigan just is going to start getting into the infused liquids game, and I know I've spoken with you about some really cool products along those lines. What kind of stuff does that kind of market bring?
What kind of like beverages?
We talked about the wines and water and just lots of utilizing some of the ability to absorb the stuff into different things now, and like the water is kind of a really unique, kind of a cool product just by itself, but the wine thing is really interesting too. So all types of stuff are coming down the pipe with this, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, across the beverage market across the country is, I think it's very much the local, what they want, right? So in Texas, putting THC in tea, probably 100% of the time. I don't even know if people like tea in Michigan, okay? But I've been told that lemonade, you guys like that up here. In Kansas City, it was all about root beers. And when I say all about, what I mean is, they have their medical market there, right? And it was the local population. You could go to 15 different craft brews and get 15 different, these are like restaurants where you can go and get different root beers. So it's just part of the scene there. So for me, what I'm hearing is you guys like lemonade up here. You like sparkling waters and seltzers. Those are not
And
my
combining
favorite
tea
things,
and-
but I'm not
and
from
lemonade.
here.
I like
Okay? I like
tea
sugar in my beverages. Okay, I'm from the South. You got
We like unsweetened tea and sometimes combined
Right?
with lemonade.
I had a sweet tea here from a restaurant. I had to add sugar to it. What's going on with the Michiganders? Okay, like I don't. It's okay. I'm adapting. I think that there's plenty of space for that, but I think there's also space for people to just have a substance that they can just add to whatever they're drinking at the time. And
I totally dig that, especially up north at the lounge. Would be perfect for that.
yeah, and I think that there's a new product coming out of California, which is a non-alcoholic mixer, right? And with THC in it, and it's like if you were gonna have like vermouth or something like that, but it's made, it's just flavoring. Apparently, there's like an entire non-alcoholic cocktail hipster thing happening somewhere in the northeast of the country, and the people in California are manufacturing the product and shipping it to them, because so you know it's there's this like hidden speakeasy resurgence that is happening. And making fancy cocktails with THC in them is part of that. So perhaps the storefront will have those in it. Maybe, who knows?
Well, that would be cool. I don't drink anymore and have not for a long time. I do like beer and wine at large, so I can see liking those products when they become available. And
I got a question, Tiffany, about like all the stuff going in these food products and drinks and whatnot. It's usually just a distillate of THC. And what about the full plant, the full spectrum? Isn't that important that we have the full spectrum in these products and not just THC? Because we don't have a THC system, we have an endocannabinoid system.
There's nothing that prevents you from using a full spectrum extract to make any of these products, except for you deciding that that's what you want to do, right? As a commercial entity.
Do
right?
you think it's important that we have the full spectrums in these, at least have that option? Because it seems like everything's a distillate nowadays.
Yeah, I think that the processing that happens makes most distillate products way less full spectrum than may be advertised. You know, for instance, if you, just to get to crude, right, which would be as close to full spectrum as you could possibly get with like a standard ethanol extraction. I mean, it's going to an ethanol, created as a tincture, going through multiple layers of filtration, coming out, going through some kind of evaporation technology, which is heating it exponentially, right, which is degrading the color if it was not already degraded by going through all these other things. And then decarboxylation, which again is raising that temperature up. And now you have a full spectrum, right, non-distilled crude, but its terpenes have been degraded by heat, right? It's gone through a number of different filters, right? So you may be leaving things behind. And a lot of the times the filters are meant to pull things out, right? So it's like pulling out plant proteins, pulling out plant sugars, right? Like removing all of the waxes. Like there's a large portion that does that for most of these processes. There are processes that don't do that. You know, I was actually just talking to the powers that be at my company and saying, well, maybe we want to do a solventless, right? And go with like a dry sift or an ice bath, because that's going to have everything in it. And I can press that, and that oil then will be better than a full spectrum crude, right? Because it will not have gone through all those other processes. But you know, you also then you're getting your yield is very, very limited. And the color is going to be dependent on the plant material you started with. Like there's so many things from whether or not it's good for the consumer. The consumer likes things to look consistently, and that always boggles my mind. I remember my last press I did right before I came up here was almost like a neon green, super, super flavorful, just like amazing, like rosin. And no one wanted it because it was green and they all wanted to be golden. right? Or like white, like off white, like that's what they want to see. And I was just like, but taste it. They're like, no, it's green. And I was like, it was cured. It's good. I promise. It's just the terps. Like taste. No one wanted to taste it, but it was delightful, right? It smelled amazing. But they were like, it's too green. We don't want it. And I'm like, all right, fine. So making sure that not only your product is something that's actually good for the consumer, right, and gets them like the full effect of the plant. I think John said it well. Like maybe we should smoke more joints.
Back to basics.
Yeah, right. Because then you get everything the plant's giving you, combusted
And quickly.
right there, and you don't have to worry about any other processing additives. So I personally am. I like a volcano. Okay, I put my flower in the volcano. I pull off the vapor. I set it at the temperature I want it to be, and we go from there. I myself am always worried about what's in the paper that I'm rolling my joint in. Right?
What temperature do you use on your volcano, Tiffany?
394. Okay. That's the high end. I can start at like 355 if it's really nice flower.
Okay.
You get to like if at that lower temperatures, can you like run it through a couple of times and get something?
Oh yeah, sometimes 4 or 5 times, right? And you're just pulling out the next layer, right? And it's I know this is gonna sound crazy, but my wife and I actually started keeping all of the remains, and they make amazing pet meds, right? Like to help your animal be in less pain because it's just the tiniest bit. Plus, they want to eat everything. Like they're gonna eat all of the ash anyway, so give it to them in a safe format, right? So we have like a little encapsulator with capsules, and we can fill it in, and the dogs feel better. So
cool.
The duff from out of the vaporizer, yes. That's what we call it.
For your dogs,
right? Because it still has like 2 to 3% THC in it,
yeah,
right, or CBD, and it's probably not very terpy, so it isn't gonna give them terp farts because those are really bad.
That explains it.
Blowing clouds.
So if it's like a blueberry strain, the farts don't necessarily smell like blueberries themselves.
Oh.
Or like dingleberries.
No. So Tiffany, we had a big fight here in Michigan a couple years ago about combining cannabis and alcohol, and the legislative representatives were very concerned that the combination is just too intoxicating and too unpredictable, and people just don't know. Let's discuss the effect on the human body when you combine alcohol and cannabis.
Yeah, okay. So let's see. When you consume alcohol, your central nervous system is depressed, and you consume a lot of alcohol, then it gets really depressed, and your respiration suffers, and then you die. Okay. When you consume cannabis products, your C1B or CB1 and CB2 analogs inside your endocannabinoid system are activated, and to some more or less degree. And those are all throughout your body, but it doesn't cause like central nervous system depression. Usually it causes things like a little bit of anti-inflammation or making the connections happen like in a smoother way. There's some brain chemistry changes that happen. We actually did a presentation on this for bud tenders last year. And like for me, when I think about it, alcohol is a poison that your body has not been designed to consume. And when you consume it, your body removes it as a waste product to protect you from the poison you've consumed. And it usually makes your body do strange things because of that, right? Whether your skin turns red or your stomach gets upset or you get a headache or your mood is kind of off kilter because your blood pressure. That's what booze does to you. And when you use cannabis with booze, all of those negative things are happening to your body, and cannabis is trying to help you self-regulate. Just like
Your mic's not working as well as it should right now,
Yeah,
Tiffany.
you must have bumped your mic, Tiffany.
Now you're gone.
Uh-oh.
I thought it was my headphones.
When I ask questions, bad stuff happens.
There we go. I heard something.
Yeah?
I hear you talking now, yeah.
Oh,
There you go.
all right. Yeah, I just switched mics. I have 2, just in case something bad happens.
You are awesome.
So
On
you're
a roll
saying
there.
when you use cannabis with alcohol, the cannabis tries to combat all of these negative effects of the alcohol. And in my opinion, the riskiest part of that is that then you think that it's okay for you to consume more alcohol, but you're actually killing yourself. Right? So
Right,
like,
'cause
let's
it's
say
poison,
you
right.
drink usually, and it makes your stomach upset and you don't feel great when you've drank too much, but you're consuming cannabis and it's reducing your nausea.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but
So you
some
drink
people-
more.
Some people,
'Cause
such
you're-
as myself, though, and I quit drinking a long time ago. If I was already drinking a little bit and then I were to smoke some cannabis, I would get nauseous, like by way of like a head spin,
Ah,
losing balance type of a feeling.
yeah. So from a motor function standpoint,
Yeah.
yeah,
So-
I could see that happening. But there's a lot of good stuff that say you have to be really stoned to have any problems with your motor function, right? So was that just your body you were more aware of what the alcohol was doing to your body because you're elevated, like cannabis is known to do?
You know, I don't know. And it's
Right.
been
So
like,
were you already dizzy and feeling terrible, but your nervous system was so shunted because you were poisoning yourself that you didn't notice until you had something else that was making you more aware?
yeah, hey, get rid of this toxin, you know,
Yeah.
or something like that. Yeah, that could be. Hey,
I mean, I
you
have
know.
people who tell me that they can see colors more vividly, that they hear sounds better, that things smell better, that they taste different. And it's like, well, did it
Interesting,
always
yeah.
taste that way and you just were not aware? There's not a lot of really good studies about that. There's some that were done by like the National Institutes of Drug Abuse, but they're very specific to try to like get all people to never consume alcohol or cannabis.
Yeah.
So I'm not 100% sure that I trust what they say.
No, but Tiffany, synaptic improvement that you described earlier, you know, the cannabis assisting those neurotransmitters and making connections between the different neurons in our brain so that we recall things quickly. And sometimes we don't recall things at all because our synapses are firing too rapidly and they get us confused. But that does make sense, though, that we would have heightened sensory experiences because now every little bit of stimuli from our olfactory is magnified. Everything from a taste sensation.
Yeah.
From a
So
touch
it really does make movies better, music better.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hope that sometime soon there will be MRI data that will support that. Like
John, do you concur?
People will watch movies without any THC and no cannabis, no terps flowing through their system, and will map their brains. And then they'll do that same thing elevated, and we will see that their brain is activated in a different way. And then we won't have to wonder anymore.
But most of us don't have to wonder anymore anyway because we've
So-
personally experienced
Right?
it. So I don't need an MRI to prove it or anything else.
We do to be able to say this is what's been concluded.
Right. We have to have this the MRIs to make clinical statements.
Yeah, scientists always want science, you know.
The clinic.
I don't know how
He's all
long
I
it takes
love
my
it.
system to get all the THC out. So, like, I don't know. It'd take a while before I'd be able to join that study.
Mm.
'Cause you
Imagine
said,
Berg going cold sober.
Well, it'd be versus when you have active, when you're actively high versus not being high.
And it may need to also be people who have it in their system all the time, and then what it is like when they get high in the moment versus
Right.
a person who doesn't usually have it in their system, right? Because maybe these two people are actually the same when they're using, when their brains are subtly different when they're not using, right? And one of the studies that I know they're doing right now is specific to like opiate usage, right? Where they're looking at this same thing and they're saying, okay, so if they were they just a chronic cannabis user versus just a little bit of a user, and of course their definition of chronic is like 2 joints every 16 days, which makes no sense, but these are the National Institutes of Drug Abuse, okay? Like they have no idea how stoned people are.
16 minutes.
Case of this show, probably.
But they are though. They're looking at this kind of stuff and seeing.
You're talking about some completely different people than the one.
They are.
They're the control group. We're the actual study.
Right. I was looking at it and they were trying to say that the normal average daily dose is around 25 milligrams. And I was like, that's like half of one joint, maybe a day.
I'm like
Like a
What?
bowl.
25 milligrams.
Some people just take a couple hits off a bowl or something like that. I guess. That does
Yeah. The end of the
Yeah.
night. Yep.
You know, Tiffany, you pointed this out earlier too. We have a lot of science that's been done on cannabis plant, a lot of science, but a lot of it has been prejudiced by preconceived notions prior to beginning the process of science, which of course perverts the outcome. It's also been done with insufficient or really terrible cannabis, and it's also been done in ways that don't involve regular cannabis users. So as much as I love all the science we got so far, some of it's really just discardable, right?
Science has been
Definitely.
shitting on us for 80 years.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, yeah.
A
I
lot
mean,
of
there's
open questions still.
If there was any science, this would have never been illegal.
Yes, sir.
I mean, they're still finding
Any
new-
science. One
And it wouldn't be a Schedule 1.
Yeah.
Or wouldn't be
Remember
on the controlled substances list at all.
It'd be a fucking weed.
Popular Mechanics saying that hemp would be $1 billion industry. Popular Mechanics knew even back then, from what 30 something.
Henry Ford created a car and fuel. You know.
Yep. So there was enough science back there to be able to do production of it, to be able to do distilling of it, to recognize the products. Park Davis created all those medicines in the city of Detroit with cannabis. Wagons and trucks full of cannabis going down Woodward Avenue, headed straight down to that Park Davis building right on the river. You know. Yep, that's our legacy. In Detroit, that's our legacy. That's our history. We can't run from that.
They go to Park Davis and they go to Belle Isle and relax for a while.
I bet they did. I just like to stand downwind of Park Davis for a little while as they were processing all that hemp. Yes, I'm sure that was.
That's where the announcement for the kickoff of one of the legalization efforts took place in 2012, the Repeal Today effort.
That's true. We decided the historic significance was valuable, and we had good media response for that.
Awesome.
Tens of thousands of volunteer signatures. It wasn't successful, but it was one of the precursors to the successful.
Yeah.
City of Detroit and the cannabis plant have a very long history. Very long history.
Amen.
And you know what? It continues forth. Regardless of how the social equity program is going to play out in the courts, it's a bold move, and if it's successful, it could set a precedent that's duplicated by major cities across the United States of America.
It's the first intelligent thing the Detroit City Council's ever done about weed.
Yeah. Well, I remember they fought Tim Beck in 2004. They fought Tim Beck in 2010. They resisted the two ballot proposals that were passed by the citizens in, I think, 2016. They've done everything they could to stop progress.
Everything.
Yep.
They
And
drug
now,
their feet. Yep.
yep. And now they've come up with a program that they actually believe in.
Well, they better start implementing it, you know.
The Detroit
I'm sorry.
City Council is made up of 3 cops, 3 ministers, and 3 social workers. So what do
Always
you
has
thought?
been, John. Always has been, though.
Yeah.
But Kwame's getting out of jail, so he'll come solve the
Yeah,
problem.
Kwame's not coming back to Detroit, buddy. He's not coming back. He's going to settle down in Atlanta.
He's in Houston, right? He moved to Houston.
Oh, he's in
before.
Atlanta, I believe.
Right.
Bet
Go ahead,
you-
John.
I bet you, if Kwame ran, he would win.
He would win.
Maybe.
He would.
He can't
People in
run.
Detroit
He's not
think he
coming
got
back.
railroaded.
Yeah, he can't. He can't.
He
That was
can't.
part
He
of his
can't run.
sentence. He
What
can't
were you
run
saying?
again.
Wait a second. What were you saying, John?
But I don't think he's coming back here.
I was saying if Kwame gets involved with this, it'll only be to make a lot of money.
Money.
He doesn't give a fuck about justice.
You know, the question with him was like, there's no question. He did some stuff, and he should have been, put through the process and found
So he
guilty.
got spanked.
It was the
He should've got
incredibly
3
long,
years.
yeah, the
Yeah, he
incredibly
took his
huge
8 years
sentence he got
spanking,
was
and
the
that was
problem.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
but 28
He
years is
lied about his
ridiculous. I mean, come on.
girlfriend. Jesus
Yeah, he
Christ.
lied about his girlfriend
Who
and stole a
didn't?
bunch of money. You know, that's not a life sentence. I mean, come on. Who didn't?
No,
How many girls you
please.
lying about, John?
Oh man. Deborah asked you how many girls you've
Lied
been lying
his
about, John.
girlfriend, and he tried to get rid of that guy, Gary Brown,
Yeah.
who's a rough character and should never have been in there. They punished him up one side and down the other. I'm glad he's
That-
back.
that
He's not
Manu-
back, he's in Atlanta. All
said
them people
Atlanta,
moved
yeah.
to Atlanta.
That
That's where his
Kilpatrick
family is.
Minigan
Family
Mansion
lives in
party is
Atlanta.
legendary, though.
Yeah, his
That's-
sister's there. I believe his mother's there.
His mother, his father.
Yeah, I've
His
seen his
kid.
father and him. Yeah.
You know, his father.
That's a
and
big
Doug
chunk
had
out of a young man's life, though. I mean, that's a big chunk and a
for
big
7
come down
years,
from where
man.
he
That's
was.
sick. Pitiful.
But they he'll be all right.
Well, yeah,
So,
that family's got bread. He'll land on his feet.
So,
He'll be fine.
speaking
Yeah,
of that,
Kwame, I
remember,
think he'll be fine.
last week's show, Ryan was on, and Ryan Basor, Redemption, Cannabis
right.
Redemption Foundation, and discussed the release of Michael Thompson. And so that date, what was that? Thursday, right, was
28th.
correct, but the release time is at 4:00 a.m. There's still going to be a lot of people there, from what I understand.
They always
Or,
do that shit in
or
the middle
when I
of the
say a
night.
lot, I mean some for sure.
Put them on
4
raid
o'clock
time.
Yeah. So they know it's a little bit of attention. They don't want to bring that much, make it that much of a
Yeah.
spectacle, I guess.
Well, it makes it more of a spectacle in my eyes.
Yeah.
People have to stand out there in the middle of the night and shit.
You just like to do that in the middle of the night because it
Yeah.
scares you more.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It's all dark and yeah.
Yep.
Bunch of thugs.
You know, the way the parole board operates in Michigan just shows how in control the law enforcement community's been over our legislature. They've made it so hard to get parole, so hard to stay out and not default on it because of all the particulars.
The Department of
They
Corrections
rule.
is corrupt as hell.
It's a police
Seriously.
state.
Yeah, well, so,
What's the word?
Tiffany, you've seen the political process maybe in several different states. I'm not sure how much different Michigan is, but police and prosecutors have an inordinate amount of influence over the
They
legislative
rule.
process in the state departments and elsewhere, and tend to, not push things in the direction that many of us, from our perspective, would like to see things go.
Yeah,
John's correct,
most of the states I've been in, the funding coming from the taxes on the products was
Goes to
needed
the
in a
police.
very specific way. And where I came from in Arizona, like the local police department, they came by like a couple of times a week just to make sure everything was fine. And, the local sheriff was like, helped do all of our background checks and handle all of our fingerprinting. It was a more friendly.
does not sound like what goes.
What do you have
No,
to
so it
fingerprint?
was
What
different.
did they have to fingerprint you for?
Yeah. Why
Well,
did they
What's
have to?
wrong?
Why did they
There's a
have
lot
to
of things-
fingerprint
You're
us?
A
crook.
lot of things, John, don't make any sense,
Yeah,
You
why-
add the
why
word
did they-
marijuana to any
If
other
the police
conversation.
If
They
you see it's
didn't-
coming from a police state, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, for sure. They didn't want people who had worked with drugs in the past to be able to work with drugs legally.
Right.
And but they just passed a new law there, right? That did away with that, right? So
In
you
Michigan
can
also, Detroit.
And
also.
you can
It's
actually get
huge.
a better cost on the licensing fees and things like that as a result of that here. So,
yeah.
I'm in the best category.
Legacy
What's
Detroit.
that?
13 years
you're a
in
legacy?
Michigan and a conviction.
Right.
That's good.
So what's the
Legacy.
plan, John? What's
Yeah,
the
the
plan?
Legacy Detroit. Yeah, you're in
I have
Detroit.
no plan.
So what social lounge where?
I'm just trying to open a coffee shop where you can have a cup of coffee and smoke a joint.
Right.
Do a crossword puzzle in peace, right?
Sounds
Yeah.
good.
Nice.
Oh
Sounds
man,
relaxing.
It'll come to Detroit.
I see it.
I think Berg's trying to make a pitch for Medical Mondays John Sinclair combo there. Yes. Roach is joining in.
He's
I
wearing
got
the
my Medical Monday shirt on too.
Oh, he's already
We
got
got,
you hooked, John.
We got Jazz
Wow.
Cabbage swag
Look at
coming
that.
pretty soon now that we're.
Berg, come bring me my weed.
Yes.
Berg brings me my caretaker weed. I love Berg.
For reasons other than that, maybe too.
Yeah. Oh,
We have no other relationship.
Oh, You heard it first on Jazz Cabbage Café.
We weren't supposed to talk about that, man.
Fantastic. So Tiffany, when we talk about other states and then we talk about Michigan, one of the biggest problems, of course, is the schedule of controlled substances. Michigan's schedule continues to have cannabis as a Schedule 1. I know other states have their own schedules as well, and they all keep Schedule 1 too. But what can be, what's a consequence of dropping from Schedule 1 to Schedule none? As far as you can tell.
Yeah, so Schedule none, non-scheduled,
Yes.
no consequences. Okay.
It's called freeing the weed.
Yeah,
Yep.
weed is free, and maybe we still regulate it in some way to make sure consumers are safe and people aren't like, I don't know, pretending that oregano is weed and spraying it with.
Years, as if nobody ever died.
Right? Yeah, the only time people died is in a pseudo-regulated environment, right?
Adulterate it.
Yep. Once they start adulterating it, so we have to make sure that people don't adulterate, right?
Right. So if we do that, I think we'd be solid, right? But if it gets scheduled down, that is not any better, right?
Schedule 2, Schedule 3.
Schedule 2, you got to have a doctor and a prescription and a pharmacy.
Right.
No.
You can't make it yourself, right? Let's think about some drugs that are Schedule 2. Methamphetamines. You could make it yourself if you were a chemist and had access to materials, but if you did, you'd still go to prison because we live in the police state.
2-liter bottle and baking soda, sure. Yeah.
Right? Or opiates, okay, that are not heroin, also in that schedule, right? Everything else that is scheduled is not something that you can make at home,
Yep.
that you can grow at home, right? And so sometimes we're like, oh, it just needs to be dropped in the schedule. And like, yeah, okay. And then we'll still be covered by the FDA. The moment it's not a Schedule 1, the FDA takes over, just like they did with hemp and CBD products, and nothing can go across state lines. You can't make any claims, right? Doctors won't be able to recommend it at all any longer, right? Because it won't be covered by the state, it'll be federal. I mean, the consequences are huge. That's why I'm constantly advocating at the national level, right? That we do away with the scheduling, create a new category for it, just like we have categories for caffeinated beverages, okay? And we have categories for alcoholic beverages, and we have categories for, leafy greens, right? To make sure that they're not adulterated. We create its own category and then we treat it that way. So it's not a drug, right? Even though we all like its effects, but we don't treat it that way, right? We all like the effects of caffeine too. Comes from a plant, gets extracted from a plant and added into 40% of the beverages, if not more, that are made in the United States, right? Incredibly addictive drug, right? That causes, changes to your brain and, people have actually died from consuming, right? We could treat it in the same way if we wanted, right? We have the ability to do that. We just have to have the political will to do that.
Yeah, as you know, the MORE Act went through Congress toward the end of the last session, and that included, removing it. The other option that was discussed, and Howard Woolridge, who has been on the show and one of the founders of LEAP and does a lot of lobbying in Washington, D.C., and is a former cop, just thought just descheduling and removing the conflict from the federal government and the states would be the initial beginning, and I kind of agree with that. But making its own category for commercial purposes to make sure it has some kind of vetting process for the consumer, I think makes sense to a lot of people. I mean,
but tobacco and alcohol are neither one of them appear on the schedule of controlled substances, and they have plenty of restrictions and rules, right?
Right. So like
they have their own category with their own set of regs.
No, right on.
Do the same thing.
And in our state, this is what John's case is about, is actually taking it off our state's controlled substances list. It remains on there, even though it remains on there after we decided that it had medical efficacy, which is in conflict, obviously. It remained on there after there was a commercial medical cannabis program in which the caregivers under emergency conditions participated, and the state allowed for them to grow, put it in a vehicle, transport it to a store, and bring it to market. You know, again, not how we treat a, you know, a schedule of controlled substance, let alone Schedule 1. And then and at one point, as a result of some legislation that passed a few years ago, that never really got implemented because it was dependent upon descheduling federally, or at least taking off Schedule 1 federally. Cannabis simultaneously became Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. And Schedule 2 with the caveat when being used medically. So
Senate Bill 660.
yeah, so it was there rationally, and then, you know, kind of like to rub it in, an extension of absurdity, you know, say, you know, it's got no medical benefits, you know, until it does.
Yeah, but the reality here in Michigan is that we have three tracks that are almost identical. We have cannabis, which is created in Michigan and distributed in Michigan through a regulated process. We have alcohol, and we have tobacco. The only difference being that they're not created in here. If we took it off schedule of controlled substances, none of that would change.
So yeah, so like and that's what I was getting to. The proposal is here, you know, it is in that area of law, that Michigan, you know, law and the code right there. It specifically says this does not include alcohol and some other, you know, byproducts and tobacco and some other things. Simply, you know, striking it, which Tom Levine was here, striking it from the list and you know, in its association in other laws, because it is kind of tangled in and complexly involved in some other things, as considered a Schedule 1 there. So it'd have to be taken out of all those references, which, you know, fine with me. Some people discuss that as if that's an extra chore that, you know, could be avoided in some other way or something like that. But I mean, that's where we are now. And
I think there's a little bit more to it than that, you know, and, you know, kind of watching other states and their machinations and, you know, being in the police state. I don't know. I haven't looked to see, but in other places, the seizure and forfeiture of property is a huge money-making operation for these government entities that are doing enforcement actions. Mm-hmm. And the incarceration of the people that are being captured under these laws in the privately owned prison system is a huge industry, right? And those people are spending hundreds of millions of dollars to make sure that this law doesn't get changed, and to include all of these extra caveats, and to make it harder and harder and harder for people who have been impacted by these laws over the decades to do anything, right? Like, that's where this is coming from. Like, no, like, cannabis guy is walking in there and being like, you know what? I've been growing cannabis illegally for 15 years and I've only been arrested once and I'm not in prison anymore. And I think that everyone like me should never be allowed to grow weed legally. Like, that's not happening, right? It's these other people. And those people are at the table and they're standing next to the doors and not letting other people in, right? So making, like, working together, lobbying together, you know, being consistent with the language on a national and state level, like, all of those things are important, because the powers that the industry as a whole, and those of us who think that the equity of a lot of the regulations that have been put in place are just just wrong, right? Just are unfair. That's who we're fighting against, you know? And when you think about that, you know, just, you know, if you feel like it, just look up like the largest prison system in the world, which is now mostly handling immigration detainees. But just look at it and look at how much money they spent last year lobbying the government, right? To continue to incarcerate people, to continue to detain people, to continue to seize and forfeit people's property, right? I mean, it's billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars, right? And when you look at how much money was spent lobbying on our side of the fence, it's like 10 million bucks. So, I mean, I disagree that that's the way it's happening, and I wish that it wasn't the case. But I mean, like, the battle is going to take forever because of that, right? I mean, we're okay.
Well, there's something that's motivating people to ignore, you know, the irrational scenario and, you know, keep that position alive because it benefits them.
Yeah.
And that's exactly correct. I mean, that's what we've been fighting against for a long time here.
It's messed up. And honestly, it's the hardest part about when I go to like these work groups and I work with the legislature to kind of explain the reasons why I think things should be done one way or another. Because at the same time, somebody's coming in and telling them, you know, make it as hard as possible, right? Make it cost so much that no one can do it. Make it.
That's it, yeah.
That's exactly what happened with the MMFLA. When
Yeah.
we got 2016, the legislature took so much input from special interest lobbyists that they had huge astronomical fees. They wanted to keep it an exclusive club that almost nobody could get into. And they wanted testing standards to be ridiculously high so it would be easy for people to fail.
Remember, the MMFLA passed in a very conservative legislature composition of lawmakers, and some of the ideas obviously were, especially with the transportation provision. If you notice, there's a transportation thing that's one of the licenses. That's not there because it makes direct sense. It's there because it was designed at one point to be a backdoor into having more control over the market.
Yep. And especially the collection of taxes. They had originally envisioned collecting taxes between the cultivator and the processor and the transport.
Set up most of the money for their buddies with a limited amount of like distributors that can make really the big money in that kind of
John?
stuff.
In prison, they're going to take our money. They're crooks.
Yep.
To be incarcerated.
I think it was looking, what is it? Eaton Rapids? Is that the, it's south of Lansing, pretty
Yeah.
sure.
Mhm.
They have a budget, like a city budget, and it was like $400 million, which includes like their schools and everything. And 380 of that million was for their police,
Yeah, right.
right? Like what the hell,
That's a system that's completely out of whack.
right? I mean,
That's what we live under.
all right.
Well,
That's
we had
I don't even know how many people live there, right? Let's do that. So that's like $30,000 a person. It's
Yep.
crazy.
well here in Genesee County, we had a big issue in Thetford Township where the program where police chiefs are able to get used military equipment for free or discounts from the federal government kind of went wacko. We had people getting MRAPs, these giant trucks that were really not even allowed to be driven on the road surface itself.
Totally
Yeah, they
impractical.
had fucking arsenals and shit.
You have to fly somebody in from somewhere else in the country to repair it at a
For what
astronomical
would they
rate or
ever
something like
need
that.
any of this crazy equipment for? For what?
For you and
I mean,
me.
Yeah, it's for us.
They don't
It's
need
to
anything
prevent
that big
us.
to get me,
Bust
John. You
into
know.
our houses.
So remember, Sheriff
Knock my house
Fettersfield
down, huh?
in Saginaw County gave it back.
Yep.
And said, we don't need this. If we're ever in the situation where we would really need to like go over, weird terrain or whatever to go save people, we'll call in like the National Guard or take emergency actions that are
Well,
necessary.
I'll tell you what, a Dream
Resources that already
Cruise,
exist.
they roll those vehicles out at Dream Cruise at the beginning of the Friday night before Dream Cruise. Every year they do like a cop and light show or something. And all the departments bring all their little toys with them, and they roll down Woodward with them, and it looks like the fucking army coming out. It's crazy. Some of the
Because
shit
they're
some of these
reminding you what
departments have.
the Dream Cruise is about, getting stopped by the police on Woodward.
Yeah,
Getting the
exactly.
ticket.
But it's a
But
trick
Tiffany,
to
people
see
used to
what
like
these-
drag races, obviously Detroit, in cars and muscle cars, that kind of shit. And
Right.
Woodward was like
They ain't
drag
dragging
racing.
nothing in the Dream Cruise.
I
mean, where I'm from, they're usually used to scare people. The last time I saw one of these vehicles, we were doing a protest against police brutality outside of Kansas City City Hall in Missouri. And there was about 40 of us. Okay, it's not even that many. The 40 of us with like little paper signs, okay? And like saying, stop killing black people, you bastards, okay? Like just not hardly any of us, middle of the day. And they just brought 4 of them.
Wow.
And they put one at each corner,
Wow.
right? And then they pull these fences and put these fences between each one. And then they had guys standing at the top with water cannons, right? Because they installed these water cannons on top of these. And I was thinking to myself, okay, there's 40 of us. There's 4 tanks. You win.
Yep.
What you win. That's all it is. And sometimes my my friends from other countries will be like, oh yeah, Americans so great. And I'm just kind of like, dude, you have no idea. Like the police have multiple weapons all of the time. Right. I had some of my friends come over from the Netherlands. And they love the police there because like there, the police like they hand you coffee. Right. They're like, hey, have a nice day. Here's coffee. And here, like the police don't, well, in Kansas City, anyway, I don't know if it's like that here. I haven't really interacted with the police here much, but in Kansas City, no, man. Like if you see police, something is wrong. Somebody's getting arrested. Doesn't matter what you're doing.
Start getting PTSD immediately.
Yeah, I'm still terrified, right? And
I live in Flint, so if I see the cops, it means like 2 hours ago, something bad happened.
Yeah.
And they're just now arriving. Yes.
2 hours ago.
Yeah, it's not good, and they're brutal. I mean, I know there's a lot more terrible stuff that's been on the national stage from the other side of Missouri, but there's a reason why there are travel bans for driving through my home state because the police are so brutal, and they will take you off to jail and let you die there without even telling anybody you were in jail.
In the 80s, I was really surprised that when we got pulled over by an Ohio State trooper, I went to college in Columbus, Ohio. We got pulled over by an Ohio State trooper. You had to make payment right then, or you went to jail until you could make payment. And back then, no cell phones, nothing like that. He had one of those old ka-chunk credit card things where they would put the paper down and put the credit card on it, and then with the carbon paper, and then make an impression of your credit card slip. Right there in the trooper's thing. He set it right on the hood of his car. Like it was, I do this 10 times a day. No big deal.
And it was worse if you had a Michigan license too.
Oh my God.
License plate, oh my God. It was
we
really
were
bad.
going from Columbus to Ohio University up in Akron. So I wasn't an Ohio car, but man, it was just crazy. To me, that was outrageous. But to Ohioans, they were like, yeah, that's just what happens.
That's how they do business. That's how they raise money.
Arrest you for buying papers.
Yes. Yeah, the paraphernalia law in Ohio has been notoriously bad over decades.
Ohio and Kentucky.
Washtenaw County, everybody. Washtenaw County. That's where it's at.
They're getting into
Washtenaw County, where entheogenic substances will not wind you in any trouble.
Well, not only that, but people who get pulled over for possessions, if they find any sort of drugs inside their car, they're not going to prosecute people.
Yeah.
If they're getting pulled over for a headlight being out or something.
They elected the right guy as prosecutor.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
That's
Ellie Savitt appeared on this show and other shows multiple times, talking to the cannabis community about some of the things he promised he would do if elected as Washtenaw County prosecutor. And I will say, one of the very few politicians that has actually lived up to what I believe he promised to us within the first.
So the very next best, the best sounding candidate during the primaries, in my opinion, Burton Harris.
Victoria
Burton Harris is now an associate prosecutor with Ellie's office. She ran against Kim Worthy for Wayne County, and he was the best that actually won. So those guys together are really, one of the things we asked them all, you say this now, this is your philosophy, you want to go in there and change things, stuff like that. Once you actually get that position and you're confronted with the machine that's in place,
the culture of the cop,
are you actually going to make these changes and stuff?
Yes.
And they all said, yes, we're going to go in there. We're in it. This is one of the first times we've seen something like this, though. They really went in there and made new policy and changed things around right away and didn't give a shit about what anybody else thought about it.
John, what are you trying to say? I'm sorry.
They're making the changes now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In Ann Arbor, we passed a $5 fine 50 years ago.
Yeah.
48 years ago.
It's $5 for adult in possession.
Or any marijuana crime.
Yeah.
Sales.
Okay.
Possession of any amount.
And they upped it to $25. Not that.
Like in the late 90s or something like that.
Still.
Inflation.
Slap. Little slap. That's all it is.
Still there forever.
I've had a couple.
It's there forever. I know it might be a little slap, but it never goes away. Right?
Yeah.
Like when I think about it, a little slap like that for me, if I wasn't working in cannabis, would mean I would never work in pharma, because I would never be able to go to a DEA controlled facility ever.
Do you see the even that industry, loosening up to the concept?
It's only
No?
crime. It's a ticket, like driving through a red light.
Yeah, they don't seem to care.
Yeah, they have their own standards.
They do.
Hey,
Yeah, I used to be very active with political societies and professional societies in pharma, trying to make sure that we're making regulations that make sense to keep people
Okay,
safe instead of just like randomly making regulations, which we
they're the
do
biggest
often.
threats in our society.
And yeah, they were not happy when I made the switch. Like those people that I spent decades of my life with cultivating relationships are like, you're doing that now? Have a nice life. Just done.
Pharma
Yeah.
is the biggest crooks in our society.
Yeah. It didn't feel like that when I was doing it, when I was making medicine to save lives. But
Money should be taken away from them and they should be incarcerated.
Yeah, there's a certain segment though that has kind of like overstretched, probably reasonable boundaries in order to profit. Doesn't mean that the entire industry. I mean, some of it is very necessary and has been very helpful, obviously.
Yep.
And I think
and it's crazy because it didn't always used to be that way. When in the 60s and 70s, when the regs were first starting to come out, people were making drug products, solving problems that we don't even think of as problems anymore because there's medicine for them. And they were doing it for free. I mean, they were making vaccines for free. They weren't getting in patent fights with each other, and they weren't, it's just different, right? And then somewhere
those
along the
turf
line,
wars are
yeah,
part
and like
of it.
the mid to late 80s and early 90s, it all changed. Now it's intellectual property driven, and who can get 180 days exclusivity or more, and who can get the same drug basically through the FDA faster, so you can sell it for 7 years and gouge the consumer as much as possible in the United States, but sell it around the world for nothing, right? I mean, give it to people in the UK for $1 and give it to people in Africa for free, and the people in Asia don't even have the disease, right? Like
Yeah, so a lot of people are familiar with the abuses with like pain, killers and opiates and things like that. But what Tiffany describes is how this issue can go and apply to many products, not just those things that are very desirable or easy to sell all over the place.
And I don't know if you guys recall, but do you remember what it was like to not have Tylenol?
Yeah, Bayer. Yeah, just aspirin.
Just had aspirin.
That's it.
Right? And you couldn't use aspirin with kids because it makes them really sick sometimes and kills them. Right?
You had to use bufferin.
All right. And I mean, that all changed, right? That has changed in our lifetimes. Okay. And that was the difference between, babies dying of fever and not dying of fever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so sometimes when I think about it, I'm like, okay, wow, like how far we've come. But then other times I'm like, oh my gosh, like my wife takes a medication and it's like $7,000 a month without insurance, right? And it's a little capsule, okay? It's not costing them $7,000 to make it.
Well, it seems like greed kind of
Understand
everything on some level, in some way.
John, what were you saying, John?
what part of crooks don't we understand?
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
right?
I mean, when there's an opportunity,
They're
those
taking advantage of it. It's just
those
crazy.
will step up and benefit themselves.
Right. Well, I remember a time when chiropractic, when acupressure, acupuncture, when these were voodoo science, and traditional medicine absolutely rejected them. And they had plenty of studies showing it was all fake and it didn't work and anything else too. And then, the people started to appreciate the fact that it actually does work. And as it grew in popularity, the American Medical Association was forced to relook at it and in order to do something about it. And now we have acupuncturists that travel with the Detroit Tigers when they can travel and when it's a regular season, and we have chiropractic as a normalized process in medicine. So there's a lot of ways in which the system resists change. We've seen it with cannabis too. Despite the science, still hear lawmakers tell me there's not enough science on cannabis. Bullshit.
We've only been studying it for thousands of years.
Never enough science to make it
Hey,
illegal.
we can learn a lot more, but we know that it's not
Safe.
going to it's not going to cause the issues that are concerned.
So
Exactly.
it's only going to kill you if a bale of it falls on you. Okay,
Right.
it's
There you
safe.
go.
At this particular
Right
point, the science is with us. But even if you ignore the science, look at society. Society's changed its value system. We now have almost 46, 47 different states that have some form of decriminalized, legalized recreational or adult use marijuana. Even some of them just have a decriminalized cannabis use. But that's you can no longer. What's that, John?
That's a good start.
Yeah. Well, you'd think that would drive some action and some change on a federal level.
It will. What's going to change is when 2/3 of the
But more
population.
than serious fault as we're at it the last second.
What's going to change is when 2/3 of the population is clearly in support of legalization. Then
We're there.
We're about there, man.
all
All the polling says we're over 70% support nationally for legalization. Medical marijuana is in the 90s.
The hard part's still going to be taking it away from the police.
I know.
It's already been demonstrated to be a pretty issue in our state, and we kind of alluded to that earlier. We've had some pretty favorable people in some good positions that haven't necessarily taken the leaps that we kind of thought that they would. Not that they're bad or do a bad job in those positions, but the machine is pretty strong. It's
Very
one
strong.
of the really refreshing things of watching Ellie.
Authority does not surrender power willingly, and it must be wrested from them by action of the people, which is why we have both a House and a Senate.
It's like Burroughs said, did they ever give anything back?
No. That's why we have to be so cautious about giving the government power over us, because they surrender it so seldom. When we saw this year expungement bills come out, expungement means the government overstepped and we're correcting. In 2014, when we corrected asset forfeiture to the degree we did, that was us saying the government overstepped and we are correcting.
Right.
So every time we get one of those things passed, it's fixing government and making it a little bit less intrusive.
Right.
But every one we take away, they introduce 5 more.
Right. Well, it's a powerful thing, the police state, and we funded it for 80 years.
The concept of closing prisons, literally just shutting one down. All right? And if you got too many prisons, that develop new criteria and let some more people out. And then when that gets comfortable, we'll close another one. And then we'll do that too until we're left with only the people that really, honest and truly deserve it. But that has to be combined with a corresponding increase in social welfare and mental health institutions, because there are a lot of people that are in lockup right now who are not mentally stable because of lockup, and they need assistance when they come out. But we've taken that infrastructure away from ourselves.
Well, in Holland, they're constantly closing prisons. They closed, when I lived there, they closed them all the time because they didn't have enough people in them.
Good. What an example to follow.
Right?
Yeah, and let's not overlook the fact that a lot of the people that own these prisons also own schools.
Right?
What's the difference?
Not a lot these days.
The quality of food you feed people, because I think there's more people watching the food you feed
People
schools.
feeding the schools and the prisons.
Yes.
Same company.
Yep. But they're not feeding them the same meals, though.
Pretty close.
Pretty close.
I don't know. I hear
Cabbage
prison.
lately.
Well, the
Prison
maggots
advocates
thing is
are
prison
close.
food. The difference is sometimes there's maggots in the prison food.
Well, I don't know.
Maggots.
Prisoner advocates talk all the time about how the caloric restrictions that are given to prisoners, where they're only given 1,200 calories a day, something like that, that for an adult man that might not be a sufficient amount. In schools, they don't limit by calories like that. So
They definitely do when you're on free or reduced lunch. And when was the last time you got a moldy piece of bread and a moldy piece of cheese, and that was your lunch because that was all you were allowed to get? Or when was the last time your mom forgot to pay for your school lunch card and you weren't allowed to have anything but a glass of water because, you know, we don't give food to people who don't pay.
I
And
just raised 3 kids in the Hazel Park Elementary School system, so I'm very familiar.
Ronald Reagan called ketchup a vegetable.
Yeah, right.
Right? I mean, wow.
Pour ketchup on bread, and that's your sandwich.
Yeah.
Crooks.
There is definitely a reason I sent my kid to school with lunch for a while, because they would give him like a moldy bun. That was what he had available to him, and I might not be able to do that much better, but I could do better.
Yeah, everywhere we look, there are ways in which the system needs to be corrected, and it just needs activists like ourselves to be able to take up those causes and fight them with vigor, the way that we have fought this particular battle. And when it's time for us to put our sword in our sheath and call this one done, hopefully we'll turn around, have a rest, and then take up another sword, another shield, another pen, continue forward.
Go ahead, John.
Say one other thing about our movement. We're the last vestige of democracy left in the political process. Our movement has taken the decision-making process into the hands of the voters directly, and we put it before the voters, and we've changed the law over and over again with nothing but opposition from the elected representatives. So our way works, and if they can apply that to other areas in America, you could change the whole fucking thing.
I think it's
the drug laws. They believed in nothing more than the drug laws. That's the biggest of their beliefs, was that we were wrong and criminal. They put us in prison. They took our money. They took our houses. They took our cars. They wouldn't let us get a job. The rotten motherfuckers.
Yeah, well, like Tiffany said, even in a small town that most of us never heard of, a large part of their budget is dedicated to the police. That's what their economy runs on, that shit.
They love the fucking police.
If they lead every parade down the city streets with their lights flashing, they finish every parade with their lights flashing. They're reminded that
them.
Yeah.
I hate them.
You know, I still have PTSD every time I see a cop, even if I'm not doing anything wrong, even if everything is good. I still,
Yes.
I get out of my head.
Terrified.
I get out of my personality, and I get into scared, frightened drug guy who's now 2 hands on the wheel, tense, white knuckled, you know, eyeballing the rear view mirrors to see if anybody's pulling out behind me.
Swallowing the lit joint that you actually did have in your hand.
I'm scared when I see a police in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And I was there 15 years, and I never even had a conversation with a police.
Yeah.
And I'm still scared when I see one.
Even the kind Amsterdam police are still frightening because of who they are. Right.
What is in the coffee they are offering you?
They got the gun.
Which is just because you're so afraid.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here in America, we have a lot of battles to fight yet. And the thing is, though, what we're seeing is we're making some change. We're actually seeing things. What I wanted to say earlier, now that I remember, yeah, the fact is, in America, those states that have the petitioning process, you know, those states that can take the vote to the people and actually make the change, those are the first ones to go legal with medical and then legal with adult use cannabis. And then after a significant number of them went, then the states that didn't have the petitioning process started to come in legislatively. I remember how we all celebrated when I think it was Vermont was the first one to go legislatively because it was such a big turning point.
Yep.
Right. And we need some kind of
New York has just demanded that they legalize marijuana.
Yes, Cuomo in New York demanded they legalize cannabis in his state because they've been screwing around for so long.
And maybe we'll get the federal recognition where we can remove the conflict or have something reasonable.
On the street for marijuana.
The stop and frisk. Stop and frisk
3
was
years ago. Stop and frisk.
And our chief Craig here in Detroit thought that was a good policy, and it's no longer in place. But that was instituted here for a little bit too.
Yep. Anytime you see someone and you have a suspicion about them, you can shake them down for no reason. That's just not
And
America.
also, the other day, like I think there was like a couple hundred activists. They had to go to court, and they were all like for like the protests back in May or June.
The George Floyd.
Yeah, and they are all like released. So like the judge ruled in their favor.
So good.
Uh,
It should be bigger news, man.
Right
I think
to peace
it was either this morning or yesterday.
Yeah.
I don't know all the details, but yeah.
Good news.
Great news.
Well,
It's a little
So we're-
crazy that, you know, cops can terrify people and little kids can be afraid when they see flashing lights. But protesters who are just, you know,
They're heavily
moms
armed.
are getting arrested.
They're heavily
Maybe.
armed in every circumstance. They got
Yeah.
big guns on their belts.
Shields and big guns and clubs.
Yeah. Rifles in their trunk,
Helmets.
rifles in the cab of their car. I mean,
Yeah, started with those Detroit stress units. You remember them,
Yep.
John, in the 70s?
Absolutely.
That's where it started. They'd roll up on you and they had big long guns in the back seat of the patrol cars. And it was some shit coming down. in the
Worse than
city.
that, they would trick people into committing crimes.
Yeah, yeah.
They have a guy laying on the ground like he was drunk with money sticking out of his pocket. You
Yeah.
go to take the money and they'd be right there to bust you.
That sounds like the gang unit.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
West-
Come on.
yeah.
Hey, John, before we go,
That we know so well.
can I ask you a question? What was Plum Street like in Detroit?
It was like a block.
Yeah.
But what
It
was
was-
it
it was a
like?
block.
I guess. I was just wondering. I guess.
There's more to it.
Supermarket.
Down.
Yeah, it was like boutiques and head shops, you know, a little
Little
block
mall.
of them.
It was like
Like
a
an
mall.
emporium, like a mall. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I lived there.
Were there other artists there? Because that was a
Yeah, because I thought it was like
Very
haste.
few lived there.
Okay.
very few live there.
It was a commercial
stores.
entity.
Yeah, with stores,
Oh.
stores, boutiques.
Okay, so
and-
before we
and
go,
head
and
shops.
I'm sorry, but I meant to squeeze this in earlier. I apologize for interrupting. I really do. John, you talked before about smoking cannabis with John Lennon. Could you please tell us a little bit more about that?
What's there to tell? You roll up a joint, you light it, and you get high.
No. Much larger story. You were in New
different getting
York
high with John
City
Lennon, man. and
after he
Or so it would seem.
sang
He
it.
wrote some songs and made some records. He ain't no different than Rick Thompson or Jamie Lowell.
He's just
Okay.
like we all are, man.
Can we trade in Jamie or Rick for
Nice.
a Beatle of our choice?
Thanks, Deb. Very much appreciated.
Did you,
Way to support
did
the
you say he was
expendability of
just
us.
he was a poet
He was a nice
Like-
guy.
like everyone else,
Everyone isn't a poet.
like the
That's
other
true.
poets?
But tell us, John, where did
Good one.
this take place?
Good poet.
He was a good poet. Where did this take place? Who was there? Who helped set it up? I mean, please give me some more. I'm dying to know.
He got me out of prison after 2.5 years.
Right.
I went to New York to say thank you.
Mhm.
I went to his house and we got high just like everybody else.
Right on.
Right?
Was it your weed or was it his weed?
Let me see if I can find something.
You
Or
probably
did you
had
both
some-
have it?
You didn't fly with no weed in 1972.
So it was John's weed, but not you, John.
Not mine. I
Right.
don't think so. All
Did-
the others took weed with me wherever I went.
Did you travel by yourself, John?
Today.
Did you travel by yourself, John?
With my ex-wife, Leni Sinclair.
Lenny's
Ah.
wonderful. John, was that at the Brownstone where he eventually was killed later on by?
No. They were living down in the village on Prince Street. They sublet somebody's apartment on Prince Street.
What was that?
Was it just him, or there was someone else there with you guys?
He lived with Yoko Ono.
So John Sinclair, John Lennon, Yoko Ono, and Leni Sinclair all sat around smoke a joint.
Yes.
And you have not mentioned this until now. This is pretty big, man. I gotta say,
Big deal.
it's a huge deal. I'm sorry.
The creative juice in the room while you were smoking that joint. I mean, the entire universe could have been made and unmade in that moment.
I've been in 200 rooms with incredible juice like that.
Yep.
You know what that is, John? You know what that is?
Oh, turn it on. You got to turn it.
Man, if I can figure that out, I will, I guess. I'm sure there's some way of doing it.
Into arena.
That's Chrysler Arena, where John Lennon and Bob Seger and Stevie Wonder all
Right-click it.
sang to get
Oh, is that what you did? Okay.
John Sinclair out of prison.
Yep.
Um,
50 years ago, this year.
Anyway, we'll get a
50
better.
years ago, 50.
50 years ago this year. So was John
That's
Lennon a
an,
lightweight? Did he cough a lot? I mean, was it good cannabis? What'd you smoke? Tell us.
He's a pothead.
Mhm.
Bob Dylan turned on John Lennon. Allen Ginsberg turned on Bob Dylan. That's the way it was in those days. The Beatles never had weed until Bob Dylan came to see them in their room and brought them a joint. Bob
Changed
Dylan,
their world.
the bard. Any room you were in with Bob Dylan and a joint was a heavy place. I never had the pleasure, but I still look forward to it.
Nice.
One of my dreams is to get high with Bob Dylan. I got high with Allen Ginsberg.
He used to come to Ann Arbor a lot.
Who?
Allen Ginsberg.
Yeah, well, he came to help us.
He was also part of his. He was Buddhist and
Religious
his.
thing. He had his
Yeah.
Buddhist, rich Buddhist people there.
Yeah.
They had an apartment in that one high rise in downtown Ann Arbor.
I have my slight brush with him was I was involved in this ongoing journal of poetry and art, and it was to combine people who were established with people who were new and that type of stuff. And I had some poetry in it, and he was at the Shaman Drum Shop doing like a book signing or something, and a friend went in and showed it to him, and he opened it up to my poem and read it and nodded approvingly, so the story goes, and that was it.
He didn't like it?
No, he nodded approvingly.
Oh,
That's he sat there in disgust.
that's good.
Yeah.
I read it.
Guffawed dismissively, yes. No.
I gave readings at the Shaman Drum, for sure.
It's a classic. Yeah.
Jim Salame, speak a little bit so that John Sinclair can see your picture.
Hey, I got John and Yoko in my background.
Did you ever participate in anything like that? What's that?
Oh, man. Weird. That's a
That
weird.
was them.
That was it. Yeah. So we are kind of past time. Is there?
Yeah.
Really appreciate it, John. You know, we'll do it again. You know, I'll have Boogie Bob on here. We'll have Adam Brooke back on. We'll have Tiffany back on at the same time again to participate in these conversations. Do you learn a lot about the history and what you're thinking about
Yes,
what's going on now? Really appreciate it, man. Looking forward to this year and the ventures that we'll be doing, and
yes.
hopefully having you up north for the opening of the
I
Calcushka
hope so, for my
Social
coffee.
Lounge. Yeah, hell yeah.
That'll
Really
be
looking forward
fun.
to that. And anybody need to? I know there's the 500th show of Planet Green Trees is coming up, not Thursday night, which. Yep, and well, I think we'd like to have you on for that, John. I haven't talked to you about that yet, but that would. But on Thursday night, Ryan from Redemption
My
Foundation,
next radio show will be number 900.
Amsterdam, yeah,
Yeah.
Radio Live
Hey.
Amsterdam.
Radio Free Amsterdam,
Rock
yeah.
on.
Wow, man, I remember talking to him about this show, and he's like, "Hey, that's a good idea." You know? Meanwhile, he's on his like 900th show.
It's a good idea to go on and air your opinions.
Yeah.
Right.
People need this.
I appreciate it, man. Of course,
Gathering of characters.
I certainly appreciate your column this
Yeah,
month.
Earlier today, I thought he'd be.
yeah, your column in Ben's magazine was a lot more
Thank you. It was very nice. Very
refreshing.
Yes.
Ben wrote you a letter of apology. Yeah, I saw it today.
Oh, really?
Well,
Really? Really? Where?
You know, there's
He's
usually some
keeping it
things
close to
stuffed
his
in
heart.
around it, you know, in one of those, you know, it's not.
maybe he's keeping it
Sure.
close to his heart, and he's just
Yeah,
not.
I didn't
I
see
got it.
one.
Maybe he's just trying to get me off his ass.
That's more likely.
Anytime he says anything bad about you guys, I'm right on his ass like stink on shit.
Nice. I appreciate it, John.
John Sinclair's got our back. All right, that's a
Yeah.
good note to end the show on.
And
Well, we're gonna
vice
continue this.
versa.
We're definitely going to continue this conversation, and we'll have like Boogie Bob on and Adam again. Adam's always great for these
Dude,
conversations.
call
So
me
many
when
others.
Bob is on.
Yeah.
I also like to talk to Adam. I don't see him no more because he's sick, and we got this bullshit thing, you know, this sickness. So I don't ever see him. I love seeing him on these shows.
All right. Well,
I'd see him today. It was great to see.
we will make sure that happens because I definitely like his inclusion in on these historical conversations. He's been a part of a lot of that stuff, and yeah.
I love seeing Berg, and I love seeing Roach.
Yep. Medical Mondays, another great show last night, and every Monday at 9:00.
I saw you were on there.
Yep. With Rick and Colin.
And I love seeing Deborah.
I love seeing you too, John.
It's just a little bit better when there's these cartoon caricatures of Rick and
Well,
myself
yeah, when
standing
there's
behind
these muscles and all kinds of things hanging over my head.
Well, she's
You
better
know?
looking than the rest of you put together.
There we go.
Nice.
Perfect way to end the show.
But anyway, anybody else need to promote anything? Say anything for sure. We're going to start doing our recognition of those who have been sponsoring us and who we like to work with, and the Botanical Company, of course, and Redemption and Real Leaf Solutions, the Detroit Nutrient Company, and Homegrown. When Michael comes on and does the cultivation kind of discussion.
Maybe, you know, when you got Boogie Bob come on, we can talk about my foundation, because he's going to help me. Thanks to you, he's going to help me set it up.
Yep. And Ryan's
So,
helping to get him on board for that too. And he's working with his son, who's also in the legal profession. Yep.
I was on the third floor. I'm on the second floor. The great artist Carl Lundgren is on the ground floor. I'm on the second floor. His son is on the third floor of my building
Got it. So
in Detroit.
you just walk down and maybe sign the papers.
Just
then
got
when
it
the time
stacked
comes.
up.
I hope so. But
Yeah.
I think
Hey.
it'd be nice. I'd like to have a chance to talk to your listeners about my foundation.
Well, no problem, man. That will happen soon enough. I appreciate it, John. And we'll talk to you about the PGT. Rick?
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, I think we're great, Jamie. Thanks so much. I know we all have podcasts to promote and stuff like that. We'll put it all in the chat. We'll put all those links up for everybody.
Tiffany, thank you again. Definitely like having you on. It was another great conversation. Your perspective is invaluable and it's unique for our group here, and we need that input. And,
Honor and a privilege. Thank you for inviting me.
Over and out.
Yep. Thanks a lot, John.
Bye.
Of course, the NTO show every other Friday, and 420 Post, Smoke and Rope, and thanks everybody.
.org.
Night.
Night.
Jazz Cabbage Cafe, award winning. See you guys.
Bye.
Good, everybody.